Are you doing too much? My daughter tells me that regularly. We're going to talk about that in our podcast today. So, welcome back to my car pod, as I'm calling it, because life is nuts and I don't have a designated area to do my podcast in. So, you just make it happen. Try to be as consistent as I can. Thank you for joining me. My name is Adam. And if you're watching us on YouTube, which we've picked up quite a bit of YouTube followers recently, or subscribers, and I'm really thankful for that because we're just trying to help people to the best of our abilities find their health, thrive in their health, so they can keep doing what they feel like they're supposed to do. This is a faith-based podcast and channel, but we talk about science, we talk about a lot of things, okay? So I wanted to share a quick thought with you. Something that has been kind of sticking in my head recently because we've been super busy. Just as a family, what we're doing, we're just it's been a little hectic. Let's just say that, okay? So, my thought is, am I doing too much? Am I busy for busy's sake? Okay. And I find that this can be a bit seductive of a thought, or busyness can be seductive. So I want to share it real quick. So like I have notes, so I always read my notes. So I can't riff from the hip the entire time. I am working on that, but in our culture tends to glorify busyness. We kind of have hustle culture. We have red pill culture. We've got guys who are just, every account is a motivational account online. And it's always about doing more, being harder, going harder. If you're going to the gym, you're going to be a gorilla, a bear, some fierce animal just doing more all the time. And as your calendars get packed and you're, answering every notification on your phone, your tasks tend to stack up and multiply over time. Being busy can feel very productive. It can feel very productive. And often times of busyness are productive at times. But not all busyness is purposeful, right? So being that this is a faith-based podcast, we're always going to try to reduce or come back to what is our original intent? What is the original purpose of what we're doing? And I've just realized that like much of my busyness is for me to avoid the silence or dealing with myself or avoiding the boredom that could come from being still. And I'm moving, but I'm not really moving in a direction that is useful. So some activity moves us towards meaningful goals. Our activity but other activities can simply keep us occupied. The challenge is kind of discerning which is which. So just a real quick thought. Okay, let's look at the scripture from Psalm 46, verse 10. This is well-known scripture, and people will quote it. And, they usually quote it in times of when they're forced to be still. But I would like to use this in terms of a disciplined act. Much of what I try to do is based on the disciplines I prefer to see in my life, because being a disciple, podcast is called the Fit Disciples podcast. And part of being a disciple is being disciplined. And much of what we do to be disciplined is we plan out the times in which we're going to do particular things, right? That lead to spiritual growth, physical growth, emotional growth, whatever it is, okay? But this scripture I really love. It says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth." Okay, so I like this because it says, it's just a reminder, be still. A lot of activity going on, a lot of, we're zooming in on details. Like I noticed, like if you really zoom in on the details of your life quite a lot, you can get really bogged down in over obsessing about particular details. This verse reminds us that purpose requires reflection. Okay, stepping back. So many might not know this, but I was a fine arts major for the majority of my educational time. Started drawing when I was about 6. My daughter is actually a great artist. She's extremely creative, way more creative than I ever was. And she's way more of an artist in particular than I ever was. I did a good job of taking what I see and putting it on paper, right? Paints, charcoal, acrylics. Watercolor was one of my favorites because it's one of the first I learned. Pen and ink, just pencil in general. Loved it all. Spent a lot of time drawing. And one of the things I learned really quickly from my art teacher, Mr. Casso, in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He was a good Cajun boy from New Orleans. And what he said was we would start working a painting, and he would require you to step away from time to time. Like if you're in a class, it would be like 3-hour class, because it takes time to sit there. And about every hour, you would need to step away, step back, and look at what you're working on so you don't get lost in a particular section or a particular detail. Because you would, especially with paints, you would overwork an area, and that would become kind of a blemish actually in the painting because you just overdid it. And especially if you're working with like watercolor paper, which is made out of like rag or really softer materials, you can actually damage the materials so that now you have to find a way to cover this. Okay, so this is a good reminder to step back from time to time and realize, what, God's actually in control of all of this. The busyness we see, the busyness we feel, the pressure we feel sometimes from life, and sometimes the pressure we feel from internally from ourselves to keep moving because we're insecure about where we are. We're insecure about the trajectory of our life. Maybe we're insecure about, what's my purpose or how am I fulfilling that in life? And I think it's good to step back and realize he's over the whole earth and he's going to be exalted over the whole earth. And if you are following him, you are part of that exaltation. You are part of that glory. So I think the scripture is a good reminder that, stillness isn't just doing nothing. It's pausing long enough to distinguish between activity that matters and activity that does not move the needle. Many churches, many pastors I know, many business leaders, moms, dads, individuals, whatever, they're really pressing hard to make progress in life, but many of us are going really fast in a direction that doesn't matter or doesn't really move the needle for us. So I like this scripture because it gets us to stop for a minute. Be still. Stop for a moment. Be still. Right? And know. Be still and know. Like reassure yourself that he's in charge and he's going to be exalted. One of the things that I think really helps with this from a spiritual disciplines point of view is having designated times of reflection, designated times where you practice spiritual disciplines. You might not be a Christian and you're watching, that's totally fine. But you may need designated times of meditation, of reflection, of solitude, quiet, reading, reflection, journaling, whatever it is. Because you get lost overworking a particular area or chasing down a particular outcome when maybe that outcome is not really tied to the person you really want to be. Okay? So designated times of spiritual disciplines, prayer, scripture reading, fasting, solitude, aren't meaningful solely because of the acts themselves. They are powerful because they require us to slow down and step back, like Mr. Casso would say. And one second. Okay. They get us to sit back, slow down, to pray well, read attentively, and to sit quietly in God's presence. We must step out of the momentum of busyness. The byproduct of slowing down is usually insight, perspective, and renewed energy to act with intention. These disciplines create the space to separate purposeful work from meaningless motion. And sometimes that meaningless motion is of my own creation. It's me simply just not being okay with, one, the process. So I want to speed up the process. Two, it could be I'm just insecure about my position in whatever I'm doing or proficiency in whatever I'm doing. So I really want to get better really fast, but you can only learn at a particular rate, right? You see this with people who want to get in shape really, really fast. What they do is they just smash themselves really hard and they end up breaking down rather than stepping back and realizing, no, this getting in shape thing is literally like a 6 month to a year process. It really is. And if you do it really fast, if you try really fast, you're going to have a lot of setbacks usually. And then you're just not going to end up getting the results you want anyway. So slow down, embrace the process, be still a little bit. Okay. Reflect a little bit. So let's take a moment and realize that sometimes when we get moving so fast, we are forced to take time to reflect through sickness, desperation, frustration, whatever it is. So I would say, as a fit disciple or someone who has disciplines in their life, if you can schedule in slower times of reflection throughout your day or week, where you take a moment to read, to reflect, to really look at what you're doing from day to day and see where is that heading, you could most likely forego the having to stop, right? So you could actually just program it into your life so that you're moving in a meaningful direction most of the time. And you're not having to backtrack, make a U-turn or whatever more often because you're not just going headlong, getting lost in the momentum of the day, okay? So here's a practical reflection. Look at your daily rhythm. How often do you pause to evaluate whether what you're doing is moving towards meaningful goals or just keeping you occupied so that you don't feel the insecurity or feel the worry? Sometimes sitting and feeling the insecurity and worry will help you to, one, embrace it so you get used to the feeling of it, and it'll let you dig a little deeper as to why you feel that way, okay? Even small pauses, morning prayer, a quiet walk, time in your scriptures, or time in a book that really speaks to you, can reveal what tasks truly matter and which are distractions in disguise, okay? Another scripture is Luke 5:16, and this is where Jesus exemplifies some of these disciplines we would like to see. If you listen to any other of my teachings, the disciple, the person who follows Jesus, should not just follow him in their mind, but they should live by the example he set physically as well. He prayed, he memorized his Bible, like the scripture, he fasted, and according to Luke 5:16, Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. He found solitude away and he prayed. He got times of quiet and he got times to reflect and really, communicate with God so that he could get an idea of what's going on. Okay. even in the midst of constant demand, which we see that in the scriptures, Jesus prioritized solitude and reflection. This wasn't like him trying to escape or a sense of escapism. It was intentional preparation. His example shows that productive busyness is anchored in discernment, not just motion, right? Like he would say, like sometimes he would come to the disciples and say, hey, we need to go this way today. And then there'd be a miracle along the way or whatever. Well, he didn't just guess that. He had times of solitude and reflection where God would speak to him and he would move forward with what he knew and what he felt and what he heard. Okay. Many of us are running around like chickens with our heads cut off. We feel confused. We feel insecure because we're not stepping back to talk to the one who's we're trying to follow anyway. Like we're following ourselves and we get ourselves in trouble all the time. Why am I following my own self? Right? That don't make sense. Why am I following what I want? Which I don't know what I need. He knows what I need, right? So stepping back and then putting that into kind of a rhythm of life will help solidify me as a disciple and give me a life, help me live a life that is transcendent, that transcends what most people deal with, what most people struggle with, because I'm living a life according to the example that Jesus set, not according to what I think is right or what the world is saying or what your favorite motivational guru says. Doesn't matter. At the end of the day, what he does, how he does it, and what he says is what matters. Okay, so that's why we step back. Okay, maybe an application for your kind of modern life would be busyness can be productive, but it's not always purposeful. But it can only be purposeful when guided by reflection, prayer, and intentionality. So build deliberate rhythms that allow for reflection and spiritual practice. Ask this question: am I moving toward my purpose or towards his purpose for my life, or simply reacting to the urgent? The tyranny of the urgent is where most people live. They live under the pressure, the thumb of whatever's urgent in the moment. And it's always going to be urgent. There's always going to be something that's urgent. So you still have to take time. Designated times of prayer, scripture reading, and solitude aren't just spiritually formative. They train us to slow down. This is the training unto godliness that Paul encouraged Timothy over. He said, physical training is of some use, right? He didn't say it was of no use. He said it was of some use. And in that culture, in that Greek culture that he was speaking from, they were all fit. Most of them were fit. They had the Olympic Games. They had warriors. There was lots of fitness around. So he was saying, yeah, that's important. But training unto godliness, the disciplines of godliness, prayer, fasting, solitude, reflection, those things matter more. Okay, that's training unto godliness. They're not just spiritually formative. They train us to slow down, to think deeply, and act meaningfully in all areas of our life. So maybe here's just a couple of reflection points for you guys listening. And this always speaks to me. I only share things that are speaking to me in the moment. Identify which areas of your life are busy with impact and which are busy with distraction. Okay? Which areas are you really busy in that are impacting your life and others? And what areas are just busy for busy's sake? Okay? Schedule intentional stillness to reflect, pray, and reassess your priorities. I do this in the mornings. Every morning I wake up, I take an hour or so. I wake up early so that I can take an hour or so to reflect. I also take time to reflect when I'm in like working out. That's usually when I'm lifting weights because it's at a slower pace. So I can actually think between sets. Okay, I'm thinking about life. What do I need? Like, where am I going? What's happening? And I'm kind of reassessing. And not everybody does it that way. You do it the way that works for you. Okay? Practice spiritual disciplines, not only for their content, but the disciplines of slowing down. So when you read, when you pray, you're intentionally trying to slow down and hear and listen. You're not just trying to talk or just read for reading's sake. I got to get 2 chapters today, so I just got to read my 2 chapters, right? And then when you actually journal, reflect on what you're actually thinking instead of just putting down what you always put down, right? Instead of just handing God some leftover time, okay? And then ask God to show you whether your pace and efforts reflect his calling and purposes for this season in your life. Just a good thought. Quick, sorry. Busyness is not inherently bad. It can be productive and even God honoring, which it can, especially if you're in a growth season in your church or in your business or your family. You got little kids running around, so you're busy. That's a growth season. That's a season of great impact, which means we need to make sure that the time we are spending is meaningful. But Scripture reminds us that stillness, reflection, and discernment are what separate motion from purpose, motion for motion's sake, and purpose. Psalm 46:10 and Luke 5:16 aren't just poetic notes. They're instructions on how to live wisely. And now ultimately that's the goal, right? You want to live a life that honors God and is wise. We steward our body, we steward our hearts, we steward our minds. Ultimately, by stewarding your own mind in stillness, it actually will have lots of results in your physical body. It'll lower your cortisol levels, stress levels will come down. It's going to be easier to lose weight. It's going to be easier to maintain health. It's going to be easier on your immune system. If you're constantly running at a breakneck pace, your immune system's going to give out. Like if you're undersleeping, eating trash because you're moving too fast, you kind of reap what you sow on that end, okay? True, meaningful work begins when we cultivate both intentional activity and intentional stillness. It's that yin and yang kind of thing. It's kind of like feasting and fasting. We need times of enjoying life and eating and having a great time and living to the full. And then we need other times where it's Spartan and it's restricted, because our bodies and our minds thrive in both. We need both. Like you need times of not eating because that your body has certain processes to clean out, waste products and cellular waste and everything when you fast. And then you build and you grow and you create health when you eat, if you're eating good foods, obviously. So we need both. We need that yin and yang, that dark and light, okay? So you need both intentional activity and intentional stillness, especially through spiritual disciplines that compel us to slow down and engage fully with God. Yep, so that's just my thought for today, is that take the time to embrace 2 sides of the coin. You need to be intentionally active for the Lord, and if you're just busy for busy's sake, you need to question some of that. But then you also need to be intentionally still so you can hear, so you can be directed, so you can understand, so you can take a deep breath, okay? So hopefully that encourages you today. I really appreciate you, and I pray that you guys would share this with somebody, leave a comment if it spoke to you, or if you feel like you're, getting some insight or whatever, or maybe you have an insight for me. Please leave a comment. Would love to hear it. Love to engage with people. And we just want to tell you we love you, we appreciate you, and God bless.